Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some Tales from Tech Support. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But I don't think you should change your mind because if you stay, there might be cookies involved. Our first story today comes to us from Ovid Pearl, wherein your hero gets a bad performance review for doing a month's work in a few hours. Let's jump right in. I had been hired as a junior mainframe programmer, my first real programming job. I had just finished 6 months of COBOL training, and with Y2K approaching, the company was desperate to get more developers. I spent my first couple of months learning various mainframe technologies, including JCL, Job Control Language, which tells which jobs to run, when to run them, and how, and a few other things. A job, in this context, is a series of multiple programs, usually COBOL, run in sequence by the JCL. If any step in the job fails, there's a set of written instructions for operators to use to figure out how, or if, they can restart the job and complete it. One thing which was very painful was the process of trying to get things to run in a mainframe test region. I had to copy over the files individually and then manually cut and paste a bunch of information to get the software to run on the new region. Since I was using an IBM terminal emulator that had VBA installed, I started playing around with it and soon built myself a set of tools to automate copying JCL, all of the programs the JCL would run, and update the data for me. It made life much easier. More on that later. The team lead from hell. Our team lead was interesting. She was a former operator. She didn't know much about programming, but she knew everything else about the system. If something needed to be done, she couldn't program it easily, but if you went to her, she could tell you anything you needed to know to get it done yourself. A senior developer was transferred to our team, and after a few weeks, she was sick of how our nightly batch jobs would keep failing. The JCL only allocated the bare minimum of disk space to each step, and we would routinely get calls at night saying a job had run out of disk space. So this developer started upping the disk space for the jobs. But the team lead ordered her to stop. If the jobs don't fail, they won't need us. Holy crap. Our team lead was deliberately hobbling development because if we did our job too well, they might want fewer programmers and she couldn't program. As it turns out, I'm a pretty good programmer and quickly started being very productive. So the team lead naturally hated me. I was a threat. It probably also didn't help that I asked her why she kept a Bible on her desk, and in the ensuing conversation, revealed that I wasn't a Christian. Y2K was closing in and the inevitable code freeze hit. I was bored. I was sitting in my cube doing nothing all day long. So I went to the manager and asked what I could do. Go see your team lead. Uh-oh, I knew this wasn't going to end well. I went to see our team lead. She looked at me and said, "We've been needing new mainframe test regions for a while, but we haven't had the time to build one. This is perfect for you." I didn't realize the full scope, but when I asked around, I was told this was a month of cutting and pasting files from region to region. An entire month of Control-C, Control-V, and manually updating all of the data in the files to point to the new region. My team lead finally found a way to both kill my productivity and punish me. I went back to my desk seriously depressed. My first real programming job, and I was getting effed by politics. This company also refused to let me have an empty cubicle with a window seat because those were reserved for senior developers. Then I remembered my VBA tools. They could only operate on a single JCL file at a time, but that would save me some time. But I'd still have to manually run this once for every VBA file, entering all of the new region data by hand. That's when I built my first spider. I realized I could write code to walk through the primary region and feed all of the data to the VBA code to do this for me. It took me a few hours to get it working, and I ran it. I went to a late lunch and it was almost done when I got back to my cube. After a bit of time, it finished, and in poking around, it looked like it was done. I sent out an email to my team letting them know I was finished, but since I had never done this before, could they please double check my work? People started coming over to my cube asking me how I did it. The manager came over amazed. The team lead sent me an email, copied to the entire team, saying that I was sloppy and hadn't updated the email addresses. That took me a couple of minutes to fix. In my 6-month evaluation, she wrote that I was sloppy for the email addresses and didn't show attention to detail. Because I had written the code in VBA, it wasn't maintainable and thus was useless to everyone else. Fortunately, the manager understood what was going on and ignored this, but that was my first experience with corporate IT politics. It's rarely stopped since then. Jumping down to the comment section for this one, there's a comment from a user called ITRCool. It says, that team lead is and was incompetent, doesn't do a good job motivating her team or fostering growth, allows politics to drive her decisions, never good, apparently has issues with personal pride. All of these are ingredients for a leader who is headed for a train wreck one day. Could take years for that to happen. Could happen in a few days if it keeps up at that pace. It's at least good the manager appeared to see through her and appreciate what you did. That will go a long way at almost any workplace, and hopefully led to some good promotions or recognition for you despite her bad practices. OP responded to this comment with, a couple of years later, after I moved on, I ran into some employees from the company and found out that she had been removed from her position. But I also found out the company had decided that COBOL was a dead end, so they figured that C++ would be a better solution. They sent all of the COBOL devs to a short C++ training course and then returned them to work, tasked with rewriting all of their code from COBOL to C++ using modern object-oriented programming (OOP) techniques. A few things about that. COBOL is procedural. None of these devs had any OOP experience. The company was using COBOL 84, pretty standard, and that has no dynamic memory allocation, so these devs couldn't possibly be expected to handle memory management. All variables in a COBOL program are effectively global, leading to a radically different approach to designing software than with C++. COBOL is easy. C++ is an effing monster to wrap your head around, especially if you've never heard of pointers. The project was a colossal failure. Update: there are other technical reasons why converting from COBOL to almost any other language can be a total failure. It's really fascinating to read about. COBOL is often faster than its Java replacements. There aren't too many stories on here that make me actually feel like the blonde guy that I am, but I'm gonna skip over all the technical stuff and comment on the manager stuff. I feel like that team lead with the right amount of motivation could be pushed to melt down a lot sooner than you might think. They gave OP a task that they thought they were going to fail in, one that was completely over their head. But OP managed to not only smash that task out of the ballpark, but to do it in a way that made it easier going forward as well for the whole company. This next story comes to us from Herities. Delete everything you have ever built for us. Let's jump right in. I'm not in tech support. In fact, none of my job descriptions ever included anything remotely resembling tech support. Yet, life finds a way. As a long-time night shift worker who often hanged out with the local IT folks and demonstrated Tier 1 support skills, looking up error messages, and even Tier 2 willingness and ability to learn and improve, I was promoted to an honorary tech support role. It was a win-win, win-lose scenario for the guys as they could chill at home while on call. In the meantime, I resolved low-level on-site issues and had something interesting or at least different to do in addition to my boring desk jockey job. The following story is not related to any of the above. Plugging VGA cables into desk stations to fix broken computers is not a story, it's business as usual. A few companies later, when buzzwords business intelligence, data analysis, data-driven decisions, etc. started to pop up on the corporate BS bingo, I was already involved in these things at my current workplace. As usual, my job description had nothing to do with it, but I had to manually create a lot of reports, work with a lot of data. I'm as lazy as it comes. If I have to do the same task twice, I'm going to spend an unreasonable time trying to automate it. The result of my laziness was a Power BI dashboard hosted on SharePoint. Behind the scenes and the shiny charts, there was a giant cluster F, as I had to solve issues with the tools I had access to. Python calling SAP, GUI scripts to run custom queries, then reading and transforming the data from the resulting exported Excel files just to spit it out again as a new and improved spreadsheet, PowerShell to manage SharePoint, then some auto hotkey and Power Automate to maximize the chaos. It had a lot of moving parts, tried to do way too much, but had classes. It was also a horrible mess, but I tried to keep it as organized as possible. Code on GitHub in a private repo, regular and conventional commits, issue tracking, well-written documentation for everything, all the other best practices, my team's standard reporting tasks, which were taking usually an entire week at the end of each month, condensed down to a few hours, which in theory could have been less if I had trusted myself, but I'd always QA'd the final result before releasing it for use. So in addition to my standard role, which I performed above expectations according to my annual reviews, I was the local BI developer, data analyst, ad hoc tech support. At every salary increase cycle, I always had to ask for a salary at the top of the range of the role which I had on paper, citing the above reasons. The company always fought tooth and nail, and it was always painful and a bit humiliating experience. Unfortunately, after a few years, they've decided that now that you've built these solutions, we don't need you anymore. We only need to hire someone to maintain it. You are fired. According to my contract, this would mean I'm still employed for another 60 days. I made sure to double check everything, rewrite some of the documentation to be more clear, refactor the code, especially my early kludgy solutions, made backups on my team's OneDrive, fixed as many issues as I could, etc. In short time, I tried to make sure that everything goes smoothly when my replacement takes over. By the time my notice period was up, they still couldn't find anyone, as they've been advertising a wonderful 3-in-1 package. Yep, my successor was supposed to do everything I was doing. My last day was at the end of the month, and I pushed out one more update under the watchful eye of my supervisor. As soon as they saw that everything had updated, security came in, and my boss said to delete everything from GitHub as it's an external site and a security risk. I tried to explain that it's tied to my corporate email, and it would be best to keep it alive and transfer ownership to my successor. They wouldn't budge and told me to delete it. Okay then, let's nuke it from orbit. Told them that there's a local copy, duh, on my work laptop, and also on OneDrive, not in my private folder. They said IT will take care of it. Apparently, that meant a deep cleanse of my laptop without retaining any of the data, while the she's on maternity leave woman's laptop was still in locker after 4 years. So the only remaining copy was in my former team's shared OneDrive folder. A month passed, and my former boss called me asking for help. They still haven't found a replacement, unsurprisingly. Not wanting to burn any bridges, and because I'm an exploitable idiot, I told them sure, I'll help. Toss a steak dinner voucher for 2 at a local mid-range restaurant, and I'll help. They were dragging their feet, despite the fact that my ask was significantly lower in value than what the contractor rate would have been, and I knew they could expense it anyway. After a day or two, they gave in. I hopped on my bike, signed an NDA, got a laptop, and asked a team member to add me to my team's channel so I can start working. As I started to poke around on OneDrive, I couldn't find my backup folder. After a while, went to ask my former boss where did they move it, as I can't find it anywhere. Oh, we deleted them, didn't seem important. We're only a couple of files though, I'm sure you can do it easily again. Those few files were the result of hundreds of hours of experimentation, trying to figure out how the various systems work together. Just the pandas part was a couple hundred lines of un-effing data. And without documentation, there was literally zero chance of recreating it in a short amount of time. Can't you just restore from that online hub thing? Not really, as you specifically asked me to delete it despite my protest. I left without getting my steak dinner. A few days later, they've called me again asking how much it would cost to make a brand new dashboard. Apparently, some corporate bigwigs overseas were using it for their C-level BS, PowerPoint meetings, remember it included global data, and were pretty pissed that the fancy charts were gone. I may or may not have found a relatively recent local version of the Git repo on my Raspberry, which I may or may not have used to do some of the number crunching, as my old crappy corporate laptop could barely handle anything. Yes, a Raspberry Pi 8GB outperformed it. May or may not have forgotten to mention this obvious security breach and build out my hours as I've been creating everything from scratch. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there were a lot of encouraging comments for OP. One of them specifically from Tophertanium says, "When you see the writing on the walls, make contingency plans, and can stick it to the corporation, it's great. When you luck into their incompetence and then can milk them with consulting fees, it's beautiful. I shouldn't feel this happy at work, and yet here I am. Congrats on the amazing work and the self-learning." So it sounds like OP's on a bit of a free ride right now, sticking it to the company and bringing home a paycheck while sitting around doing little to nothing. A few people down in the comment section were asking OP how much they were billing for the contractor rate, and OP mentioned, "I billed them between FU and I still want to work in this industry, possibly even for this company later." One thing I absolutely love is how lazy people seem to be some of the most efficient workers sometimes, or the most efficient people at finding easier ways to do things. Check out both OPs linked in the description down below. If you haven't already, remember KCC has a podcast. Search for Karma Comment Chameleon on any of the major podcast platforms. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.